I was hanging out with my friends, just a typical Saturday night, and around 12:30 a.m. I went back to my friend's house just to smoke some weed. So after a bit, I decided to walk home from his house. It's only a few minutes walking distance away, so around 1:30 a.m. I start trekking in the cold and dark night to go home, but I wasn't too worried because the city I live in is pretty safe. When I'm about halfway home, a taxi van slows down and drives by me, going the same way I was. It makes a U-turn in front of me, drives by me again, honks, drives past me, and makes another U-turn behind me. And this time, they come up to a complete stop. I didn't get to see the driver, but the passenger was between a 25 to 30-year-old male and proceeds to shout, "Hey, Sixty, you look hot. Want to come to a party?" Aside from the fact that this was creepy, I found it strange, for I was literally wearing my dad's sweater, my dad's jacket, plain black leggings, and big winter boots. I instantly freeze and think for a second maybe he thinks I'm a prostitute. But prostitution isn't common at all where I live, for it's not a big city, and it's a very cold night during this time of year. After about 20 seconds of us just looking at each other, and me frozen in fear, I can't think of what to do, but just kept walking home in hopes that they'll drive away. Of course, it didn't work out that way. They speed up, and the man gets outside of the van and starts running towards me. I instantly take off, but running in deep snow boots is quite hard. So what do? I take off both of my boots, carry them, and continue sprinting for my life. I turn, and instead of going home, I'm just twisting and turning through the streets, while this guy is kind of staggering. I assume he was some sort of drug addict or alcoholic, and the taxi is speeding much faster. I can't think of what to do except run through the graveyard nearby, run to the forest behind it, and there I run along the paved trail in the forest until I get home, which took me longer, but I lost them. I rush inside, lock the doors and the windows. I sit in my living room all night with a knife in my hand. Why I didn't call the police, I don't know. I was still stoned, and so not really thinking clearly. Also, my mom wasn't in town, so I was home alone. I eventually fell asleep for a while, and when I woke up in the morning, I called the police and told them everything that happened. They didn't find anything but said they'd get back to me if they did. I'm not sure why my parents allowed these guys to live with us now that I think about it, but the guy had always been nice to me and my brother, kind of like kooky uncles, and my dad had been friends with them since he was a kid. Anyway, when he left a book called the Necronomicon. I was a kid, I didn't have a clue what it was. We were moving too, so my dad just threw it in the yard sale we were having. It's getting late in the day. Mom and Dad are packing what is left of the yard sale stuff away when this creepy guy walks up and just starts looking through the stuff. He is talking to himself and just looks like something out of an End of Days movie. We'd seen him before, but he had never gotten this close. He picks the Necronomicon up and proceeds to tell my dad about how he is into the devil and wants to buy the book. The whole time, just eyeing me and my brother. My dad snatches the book from him and tells him to leave. He isn't selling the book to him. Guy gives him odd stare, does his slow walk, off, talk to himself thing. I'm a kid and forget about the whole thing right away. Fast forward to a week later, and the guy is back. Just come up to our door and knocks. My dad opens it and he leans in and looks around, sees me, and his eyes just light up. Starts telling my dad that he saw a picture of me at this circus and he wanted to take me to see it. I'm a little kid, just excited at the idea of a circus and there being a picture of me there. I'm jumping up and down asking to go. My dad tells me there is no circus and there is no picture, pushes the guy off the porch and tells him that if he ever comes near us again, he would kill him. We moved soon after that, but I still went to the same school. For a week straight, I noticed a girl I used to live with across the street from the trailer park wasn't at school. When I did see her again, she didn't look the same. She was quiet and withdrawn. Later, I found out that the very same man who had been trying to take me to the circus had molested her. I'm sorry if this is all over the place. It happened over 20 years ago, and much of my childhood was crazy like this. I am glad my dad was there, and to the man who wanted to show me my picture, I'm glad we never met again. When I was 17 years old, I was intrigued by computers and everything the internet had to offer. I soon found out about Yahoo chat rooms, back when they were used primarily. I would talk to a few people on there, including a friend I made which became a friend in real life even to this day. So I didn't think anything bad would happen to me. No one ever thinks that, especially on the internet. I met this one guy named Daniel. At the time, he was 28 years old. Him and I became friends very quick, and I felt like I could tell him anything like I knew him forever. Our conversation would last forever, and I ended up telling him more than I probably should ever tell anyone. One of the conversations I had mentioned that I was trying to go to school to become a computer engineer and was trying to find a job in the field to better suit my understandings. He then told me he had his own computer company and that he was trying to find some help. As a naive woman who was trying to find work in her field, I wanted to take the offer. I talked to my family members about it, and despite their reasoning, I took the job offer. I will be the first to admit that my family were not strict at all. My mom did not like the idea, but she said that I was going to do it anyways, and that at least she knew where I was going. I probably would have been more grateful if she would have put her foot down. The job was located in New Jersey, and I lived in Texas. Fast forward to about 6 months later. This was when things went from good to worse. He was still trying to get his business off the ground, but kinda started slacking at it. To make extra income, I would help others that needed it with their networking and their computers. It was a way to get out of the house since I was not allowed to leave the house without his knowledge or consent. I just figured he was protecting me since I was still unfamiliar with the city. Once I turned 18 years old, things started to get even worse out of nowhere, when he would tell me how to eat my food and to be a proper lady. He would yell at me if I accidentally scraped my fork against my teeth and little things like that. He would hack into my laptop to keep an eye on me and see who I was talking to and what I was doing. Every time my family members would call me, I had to talk to them in front of him. Things started getting so bad that I started staying at work longer hours just so I didn't have to go home. I would never mention this to my coworkers because I didn't want them to pry into my business. It wasn't until later that they found out on their own. One of my coworkers has a huge crush on me and always worried about me when it was time to go home. He knew that I would rather work a double shift than go home, and that made him worried. I honestly wish I stayed in contact with him. He was one of the best friends a girl could ask for. I started getting into MMORPG games since they took me out of the reality I was living in at the moment. I met this guy on there, and it made me feel good to have someone to talk to finally. I never meant anything by it. It was just an escape. Daniel found out about the stuff I would say to him and said that I was cheating on him, which I never did such a thing. Until this moment, I never believed that he would go psychotic on me or even hurt me. I figured he would just yell at me and try to scare me. One day he got so fed up with all of it and grabbed my cell phone and broke it in half. He looked at me and said, Now you have no way to tell your family what you did to me." I was literally terrified at this point. He threatened me a little more, and I started crying. I figured that was the end of it, but I was completely wrong. The next day, I packed a small bag and told him that my job would allow me to do some book work while it was slow. It was a bag of some clothes I could find in a hurry. I got to work and told my coworkers what was going on. They gave me a phone and I called my grandfather, who got me a flight to Texas as soon as he could. I was so grateful for him and everyone at work. When I got to the airport in Texas, I was greeted by my family members. I called Daniel and told him that I was in Texas and I didn't want to be with him anymore. He laughed and said, "There is no way you could have got back to Texas that fast. Come home, now." I assured him that I was not coming back to him. My mom got on the phone and told him the same. I don't know what him and my mom were talking about, but she got very angry and told him to never speak to me again and hung up. I wish I could say that that was the last time I ever spoke to Daniel, but it wasn't. My mom got a new phone to replace the one that Daniel had broken, and somehow Daniel got my number. He would call and threaten me. One time he called and my mom answered and put it on speaker. He said, "You better put her on a fucking plane back to New Jersey or I will come down there and get her myself." I almost had tears in my eyes even thousands of miles away. He still terrified me. My mom replied, "I will wait for you to come and get her. There is a body bag with your name on it." After that, the calls became less and he wasn't harassing me as much anymore. It took about 2 months for him to finally stop calling me, and I was able to move on with my life. I do not talk to people the same way I used to anymore, and I watch what I say to anyone now. I am a 27-year-old female, and this happened to me when I was 24. I live in Los Angeles and have for my entire life. I was feeling lonely, so I decided to go on Craigslist to try to find someone to hang out with. Not necessarily to date, but someone to just chill with. If it led somewhere, then so be it. That was my thinking. I emailed a few guys, one of which stood out to me. He sent me some pictures, and I was fine with how he looked and he seemed nice enough. We agreed to meet and go have coffee. It took him a lot longer than he said it would to get there, and once he did arrive, I instantly regretted what I was doing. But being overly nice, I got in his car, and instead of heading to Starbucks as we planned, he drove to a CVS. I was like, what are you doing?" To which he said he had to return some stuff to CVS so that he'd have money. I was super uncomfortable already and just wanted to get out of there, but again, my shyness got the better of me, and I just waited it out. Once he returned whatever it was he was returning, he then said he had to stop by his apartment. We pulled into this underground garage, and he said he'd be right back. You don't know how badly I wish I had run right then while he was gone, but I didn't. He got back in his car, and I could tell right away that he was high on something. Having been to rehab before myself, it was blatantly obvious. I told him that I'd gotten an emergency phone call while he was upstairs and that I was sorry, but I had to be taken back. I told him he could just drop me off at the nearest train station. I lived in a city like an hour away, so I wasn't about to have him drive me all the way home. We got on the freeway. That was the fastest route to the main stop, but we ended up passing the exit. I told him a few miles ahead of time which one it was, but he did not say anything. He just ignored me. I thought maybe he just hadn't heard me. "Hey, that was the exit, actually. You passed it," I said. Instead of pulling over to the right lanes, he kept pulling further and further over to the left until we were all the way in the far left-hand lane. I asked him what he was doing, trying to keep my cool. I can't honestly remember his exact words, but it went something along the lines of, "I'm not dropping you off. We're having sex. Why do you think I did this?" I looked at him with my jaw to the ground and asked him, "So, you are refusing to drop me off?" I asked him. "Yes," he said, and then he sped up his car. The first thing I thought was obviously calling the police, so I pulled my cell out. He turned towards me and hit me in the face hard, and I dropped my phone because I was so shocked. The phone had fallen somewhere below his seat somewhere. I couldn't get to it. I was panicking. As we continued to drive, I tried desperately to think of what I should do. We came up on another interstate. For some reason, seeing the freeways intersect and seeing that we were about to get on yet another freeway was hugely ominous to me, and I decided I could not let him get on the next freeway. I couldn't get out of the car, so I did the only thing I could think of. I took a breath, grabbed the steering wheel, turning it as hard as I could to the right. He was so shocked he didn't even try to grab it back from me. As we crashed into one, then another car, and crashed into the side barrier, he turned towards me and started hitting me while screaming, "You fucking bitch! You fucked up everything!" I put my legs up to block the blows from his fist. I ended up falling backwards out of the car after managing to put my hand up and open the door. I ran to one of the cars we had crashed into that had pulled over behind us. The guy in the car had his phone out, presumably calling the cops. I knocked on his window screaming that this psycho tried to kidnap me, and he rolled it up all the way. I couldn't believe it. When I looked back, Psycho was coming towards me. So I said, "Fuck it, clearly no one is going to help," and ran towards the fence, and was even weaker because of what had happened. So literally had to lean on the fence until it bent enough for me to fall over. Climbing up a chain-link fence was not an option at that moment. Luckily, instead of him following me, he ran the other direction. He just left his car on the side of the freeway. Once I was over the fence, I realized that I was on the same horse trails that I was familiar with because I had worked at the equestrian center nearby. So I just walked through the miles of trails until I got into the nearest city, which was Burbank, and called the police from a bowling alley. I never found out what happened to that psycho. The cops never told me after I made the report, but I hope he got arrested for, trying to kidnap and rape me. So, crazy, sadistic psycho rapist, let's never, ever meet again. Alright, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead, like, share, subscribe,